Eleanor, I did not realize you handled these kinds of acquisitions. The words came out of Henry Prescott's mouth like he was commenting on the weather. Like he was noticing something mildly interesting about a stranger he had just met. Like he had not been married to Eleanor Mercer Prescott for 24 years. Like she had not built this firm from nothing while he scrolled through earnings reports and ignored every word she ever said about her work. Eleanor looked at her husband standing in the reception area of Mercer Acquisitions. His hand rested casually on the lower back of a woman she had never seen before. A woman who was visibly pregnant. Perhaps 6 months along. The curve of her belly unmistakable beneath the expensive cream-colored coat she wore. Henry's hand on another woman. Henry's child growing inside another woman. Henry standing in Eleanor's office asking for whoever handles your most exclusive properties as though his wife of 24 years was not the founder whose name was etched into the glass door behind him. The receptionist had looked up with a polite smile. That would be Mrs. Mercer herself. She is our founder. And Henry's face had registered genuine surprise. Actual confusion. As though discovering that the sky was green instead of blue. As though the woman he had shared a bed with for more than 2 decades had been keeping some elaborate secret instead of simply existing in plain sight while he refused to look. Eleanor stepped forward from the hallway where she had been standing. Watching. Understanding everything in the span of 3 heartbeats. Henry. I did not expect you. His smile was the automatic one he used at charity functions. The one that meant nothing. The one she had seen 1,000 times directed at people he needed something from. Eleanor. He said her name like it was slightly inconvenient. Like her presence was a scheduling conflict he would need to work around. I did not realize you handled these kinds of acquisitions. She had been married to this man for 24 years. He had never once visited her office. He did not know what she did. Welcome back to another powerful story, my beloved listeners. Kindly tell me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are at. If you are new here, prepare for a story of betrayal, unexpected love, and what truly makes a family. Drop everything and listen closely. This tale of heartbreak and redemption might just change how you view love and family forever. The morning had started with hope. Eleanor had woken at 6:15 to find Henry still beside her in bed. This was rare lately. For months he had been leaving before she woke and returning after she slept. Business trips that stretched longer than necessary. Dinners with investors that ended well past midnight. The slow withdrawal of a man whose attention had wandered somewhere else entirely. But this morning he was there. Breathing softly. His silver hair mussed against the pillow the way she had always loved. And Eleanor had allowed herself to feel something she had been afraid to feel for a very long time. Hope. Valentine's Day was 2 days away. She had made a reservation at the restaurant where he had proposed 25 years ago. She had bought a new dress. Burgundy silk. Something that made her feel beautiful in a way she had stopped letting herself feel around him because his eyes never seemed to land on her long enough to notice. She had been planning to tell him about the reservation over breakfast. Had been rehearsing the words in her mind while she watched him sleep. I thought we could go back to where it all started. I thought we could remember who we were before everything got so complicated. But he had woken before she could say anything. Had checked his phone immediately. Had kissed her forehead with the absent-minded affection of someone greeting a piece of furniture they had grown accustomed to. Early meeting. I will see you tonight. And he was gone. Eleanor had showered and dressed and driven to work telling herself that the distance between them was temporary. That 24 years of marriage meant something. That if she just kept trying, kept accommodating, kept being the wife he needed her to be, eventually he would turn around and see her again. That version of herself felt like it belonged to someone else now. Someone who did not know that her husband's pregnant mistress would walk through her office door before lunch. Eleanor Mercer Prescott had spent 24 years learning how to disappear. It had started with small things. Reasonable accommodations that felt like love at the time. She stopped mentioning her commission checks at dinner because Henry's expression would tighten slightly whenever she discussed money. As though her success was somehow a commentary on his own. As though her achievements diminished him rather than complimented him. She learned to frame her professional victories as fortunate timing rather than the result of 3 decades of expertise and relationship building. She learned to say I got lucky when she closed deals that other consultants had been chasing for years. She learned to make her excellence look like accident rather than skill. At his corporate functions she would smile when he introduced her as my wife. She helps people find houses. She never corrected the assumption that she was some kind of residential realtor showing starter homes in the suburbs. She never mentioned that she had facilitated property acquisitions for 3 royal families. That she had been flown to 7 different countries in the past year alone to consult on estates worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. Henry never corrected the assumption either. Never said, actually my wife is one of the most sought-after property consultants in the world. Never said her name with a particular weight that suggested she mattered independently of him. She had become his accessory. His background character. The woman who maintained his home and attended his events and asked nothing of him except his presence, which he gave less and less frequently as the years went on. And she had done this willingly. Had chosen it. Had convinced herself that this was what long-term marriage looked like. That the fading of passion was natural. That being overlooked was the price of being committed. She had been so wrong. But here is what Eleanor had maintained even while erasing herself in every other domain of her life. She had remained exceptional at her work. Not good. Not competent. Exceptional. She could walk onto a property and know within 20 minutes whether it was right for a client or completely wrong. She could read a couple's body language and understand which partner held the real decision-making power. She could hear someone describe what they wanted and translate it into what they actually needed, which was almost never the same thing. A client would say they wanted a country estate with acreage, and Eleanor would hear, I want proof that I have arrived. I want to feel like the person I always imagined I would become. Another would request a historic property with original features, and she would understand they were buying validation. Evidence that they belonged among families whose names had meant something for generations. She was a translator of unspoken needs. A cartographer of hidden longings. She saw what people refused to admit even to themselves. She had just never turned that clarity on her own marriage. Or perhaps she had. And she had been too afraid to look at what she saw. The woman beside Henry was beautiful. Not in the way Eleanor was beautiful. Not with the quiet elegance of 52 years lived with intention. But beautiful in the way of someone young enough to still believe the world would arrange itself around her desires. Someone who had not yet learned that life extracted payment for everything it gave. She was perhaps 32. 33 at most. Her hair was dark and glossy. Her skin had the particular glow of expensive skincare and regular sleep. Her clothes announced money without quite achieving taste. The kind of outfit that said I can afford the best, but I do not yet understand what the best actually looks like. And she was pregnant. The curve of her belly sat beneath her unbuttoned coat like an announcement. Like a claim. Like evidence of something Eleanor could never provide and had stopped wanting to provide years ago when it became clear that Henry's interest in fatherhood extended only to the concept and not the practice. They had tried. Early in the marriage. Had visited specialists and endured procedures and grieved quietly when nothing worked. And then Henry had said perhaps it is not meant to be, and Eleanor had agreed because she was tired of hoping and tired of failing and tired of watching his attention drift further away each time the tests came back negative. She had made peace with it. Had built a career that filled the spaces where children might have been. Had convinced herself that her life was complete in its own way. But now she was looking at the evidence of her husband's fertility growing inside another woman. And something she thought she had buried long ago stirred in her chest like a creature waking from hibernation. Not jealousy. Not exactly. Something colder. Something that felt more like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Henry had not introduced the woman at all. Had simply stood there with his hand on her back waiting for someone to address his needs. I'm looking for whoever handles your exclusive listings. Henry said it to the receptionist without glancing at Eleanor. We are interested in viewing a property this week. Something exceptional. Something that makes a statement. The receptionist, a young woman named Carla who had worked the front desk for 3 years, looked between Henry and Eleanor with barely concealed confusion. She knew who Eleanor was. She knew what Eleanor did. She had watched Eleanor close deals that made national news. And now Eleanor's husband was standing in her office touching another woman asking for someone to help him. That would be Mrs. Mercer. Carla said. She is our founder. She handles all our most exclusive listings personally. And Eleanor saw the moment Henry understood. The flicker of realization followed immediately by something that looked almost like irritation. As though Eleanor's presence was an inconvenience. As though she had somehow inserted herself into a situation that had nothing to do with her. Eleanor. His smile was a mask now. She could see the calculation behind it. The rapid adjustment of expectations. The attempt to reframe this situation into something he could control. I did not realize you handled these kinds of acquisitions. I founded this firm. Eleanor said it quietly. 28 years ago. I am the only consultant we have for properties above 10 million. The woman beside Henry looked between them with growing confusion. Her eyes were sharp. She was beginning to understand that something was wrong even if she did not yet know what it was. You two know each other. It was not quite a question, but it hung in the air waiting for an answer that Henry did not provide. He simply stood there with his hand on her back saying nothing, letting Eleanor decide how much to reveal. And in that moment Eleanor made a choice. She could expose him. Could say, I am his wife. Could watch this woman's face transform from confusion to shock to something Eleanor did not want to witness or cause. Could blow apart whatever fantasy Henry had been constructing and force everyone in this room to deal with the debris. But something stopped her. Not cowardice. Not accommodation. Something else entirely. She wanted to see how far he would go. Wanted to watch him choose to betray her with her own expertise. Wanted to know with absolute certainty whether the man she had loved for 24 years had any capacity left to see her at all. This was a test. And Henry did not even know he was taking it. I am Eleanor Mercer. She extended her hand to the woman whose name she still did not know. I am the principal consultant here. I understand you are interested in viewing a property. The woman's handshake was confident. Practiced. The handshake of someone accustomed to being taken seriously. Simone Aldridge. I am looking for something extraordinary. Henry promised me something extraordinary for Valentine's Day. She said Henry's name with easy familiarity. With ownership. With the particular confidence of a woman who believed she had a claim worth announcing. And Henry just stood there. Watching. Waiting to see what Eleanor would do. 24 years of marriage. 24 years of accommodation. 24 years of making herself smaller so he could feel larger. And he had not introduced her as his wife. Had not claimed her. Had simply waited for her to make this easier for him the way she always had. What property interests you? Eleanor said it with perfect professional calm. As though her heart was not cracking into pieces. As though her hands were not trembling slightly beneath the folder she had picked up from the reception desk to give them something to do. Simone smiled. A real smile. A smile that said she had no idea what she was standing in the middle of. Ashworth House. I saw it in a magazine last year. Henry says you can make anything happen. Eleanor's pulse quickened. Ashworth House was her crown jewel. Her most exclusive listing. A property she had been cultivating for 3 years. A $14 million estate with a history that made her chest ache every time she read through the files. And Henry wanted to buy it for his pregnant mistress. The irony was almost beautiful in its cruelty. Ashworth House is indeed available. Eleanor said. But it has requirements that go beyond financing. The trust that controls the property is very particular about potential buyers. Simone's expression flickered slightly. The first hint of uncertainty. What kind of requirements? Personal ones. The property has a history that the trustees want honored. I can explain more during the viewing if you would like to proceed. She looked at Henry. He was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Something that might have been concern. Or calculation. Or the slow dawning awareness that this situation was not going to unfold the way he had expected. We would like to proceed. Henry said. Today if possible. I have availability this afternoon. 2 o'clock. The property is 40 minutes outside the city. I can meet you there. Perfect. Henry's smile was back. The professional one. The one that meant nothing at all. I will send the address to your phone. Simone, may I ask where you would like the confirmation sent? Simone gave her number. Eleanor recorded it with the same efficiency she brought to every transaction. And all the while Henry stood beside his pregnant girlfriend watching his wife arrange the viewing for their love nest as though this was perfectly normal. As though 24 years meant nothing. As though Eleanor meant nothing. Eleanor excused herself after the appointment was confirmed. She walked to her office with measured steps, closed the door, and stood at the window looking out at the city skyline while her entire body shook. Delia appeared in the doorway within minutes. She had been with Eleanor for 15 years. She had seen the interaction from her desk near the conference room. She knew. "I can cancel the appointment." Delia's voice was soft. "Tell them you have a conflict of interest. Reassign it to someone else." "There is no one else." Eleanor did not turn from the window. "I am the only consultant the Ashworth Trust will work with. If I pass this to someone else, the sale will not happen at all. Then do not let it happen. Let him find another house. Let him buy her something else." "No." Now Eleanor turned. Her face was calm. Her eyes were dry. But Delia had known her long enough to see the devastation underneath. "I need to do this. I need to see exactly what he is capable of. I need to know whether the last 24 years meant anything to him at all. And if they did not, then at least I will stop wondering." Delia crossed the room and put her hand on Eleanor's arm. A gesture of comfort, of solidarity, of the kind of loyalty that had nothing to do with employment and everything to do with love. "You are the strongest person I know." Eleanor shook her head. "I am not strong. I am just finally tired of pretending." The file on Ashworth House sat on Eleanor's desk like an accusation. She had read it dozens of times over the past 3 years. Had memorized the property specifications, the architectural details, the grounds and gardens and outbuildings, the renovation history and preservation requirements. But it was not the property specifications that made her hands tremble as she opened the folder now. It was the history. Ashworth House had been built in 1889 by a man named Walter Ashworth, a railroad magnate who had made his fortune connecting cities that had never been connected before. A man who understood movement and progress and the accumulation of wealth. He built the house as a gift for his wife Cecilia. Cecilia Ashworth had been a botanical illustrator of extraordinary talent. Her work had been commissioned by scientific societies across Europe. Her drawings of native plant species were still considered definitive more than a century after her death. But Walter had never understood what she did. Had never cared to learn. He introduced her at parties as "my wife, she likes to draw flowers," and never corrected the assumption that her work was a pleasant hobby rather than a genuine contribution to scientific knowledge. He built her a house. A magnificent house. A house with north-facing windows for her studio and gardens planted with every specimen she might want to study. A house that said "I love you" in the only language he understood, which was the language of money and acquisition and things that could be counted. But he never saw her. Never asked about her work. Never visited her studio. Never noticed when her illustrations were published in journals that scholars across the world considered essential reading. He gave her everything except his attention. And over the years that absence became a wound that would not heal. When Cecilia discovered his affair with a younger woman, she did not confront him. Did not scream or weep or make demands. She simply began making quiet arrangements. She transferred her inheritance into accounts he could not access. She consulted with solicitors about her rights under their marriage contract. She documented everything. Every dismissal. Every absence. Every moment when he had looked through her instead of at her. And when she was ready, she left. She took nothing that belonged to him. Only her own money. Only her own illustrations. Only the things she had created and earned independent of his name and his fortune. Walter was devastated. He wrote her letters. Dozens of them. Begging her to return. Promising to change. Offering her more money. More houses. More things, as though things had ever been what she wanted. She never responded. She lived another 32 years. Built a reputation that outlasted his. Trained a generation of botanical illustrators who carried her techniques into the 20th century. And Walter died alone in the house he had built for her. Surrounded by the evidence of everything he had given her except the one thing she had actually needed. The house had remained in the Ashworth family trust ever since. And the trustees had one requirement for any potential sale. The buyer must understand what the house represented. Not romance. Not devotion. But the specific failure of a man who could not see his wife clearly enough to love her properly. The trustees would only sell to someone who would not repeat that pattern. And Eleanor was the only consultant they trusted to make that determination. She closed the file. She understood now why this felt so heavy. Why her hands would not stop shaking. Why the prospect of showing this house to her husband's mistress felt like something more than professional obligation. She was Cecilia. She had been Cecilia for 24 years without knowing it. Making herself smaller. Accepting things instead of attention. Convincing herself that the absence of cruelty was the same as the presence of love. And now she was being asked to facilitate the purchase of a house built on the same kind of betrayal she had been living inside. The parallel was almost too perfect. Too pointed. As though the universe had arranged this moment specifically to force her to see what she had been refusing to see. She would go to the viewing. She would show them the house. She would tell them the history. And she would watch to see whether Henry understood what he was standing in the middle of. The drive to Ashworth House took 40 minutes through February countryside. Eleanor drove her own car. A silver sedan. Nothing flashy. Nothing that announced wealth. She had always believed that real authority did not need to advertise itself. That competence spoke louder than performance. Behind her, Henry's black Range Rover followed at a comfortable distance. She could see him in her rearview mirror. Could see Simone in the passenger seat gesturing as she talked. Could imagine the conversation they were having. What were they saying about her? Did Simone even know who she was? Did she understand that the woman driving ahead of them had shared Henry's bed for more than 2 decades? That she had stood beside him at his mother's funeral and held his hand when his company nearly failed and nursed him through the illness that had taken him out of commission for 3 months 7 years ago? Did she know any of that? Or had Henry simply erased Eleanor from his narrative the way he had erased her from his attention? The gates of Ashworth House appeared through bare winter trees. Iron scrollwork that had been commissioned in Paris. Stone pillars that had stood for more than a century. A driveway that curved through landscaped grounds toward a house that looked like something from another era. Eleanor had been here dozens of times. Had walked every room. Had stood in Cecilia's studio with sunlight streaming through those north-facing windows and felt something that might have been recognition. But today it felt different. Today she was not here as a consultant showing a property. She was here as a woman showing her husband the house he wanted to give to someone else. She parked in the circular drive and stepped out into cold February air. Her breath made small clouds in front of her face. Her hands were steady now. The trembling had stopped somewhere on the drive when she made a decision about how she was going to handle this. She was going to be excellent. She was going to do her job with the precision and expertise she had spent 30 years developing. She was going to show them this house and tell them its history and demonstrate exactly what Henry had been dismissing for 24 years. And she was going to let the truth speak for itself. The Range Rover pulled up behind her car. Henry emerged first. Then Simone. They stood together looking up at the house with the expressions of people who had never wanted for anything and expected the world to continue providing. Simone's hand went to her belly. An unconscious gesture. A protective one. Henry looked at Eleanor. Something flickered in his eyes that might have been discomfort. Or concern. Or the beginning of understanding that he had made a very serious mistake. "It is beautiful," Simone said. "It is." Eleanor agreed. "Shall we begin?" She led them up the stone steps to the front door. Produced the key from her pocket. The lock turned smoothly. The door swung open onto a foyer that had remained essentially unchanged for 135 years. Marble floors. A curved staircase. Light pouring through stained glass windows that cast colored shadows across everything. "Oh, Henry." Simone's voice was hushed. Reverent. "It is perfect." Eleanor watched Henry watching Simone. Saw the expression on his face. The particular softness. The focused attention. He used to look at her that way. 20 years ago. Maybe longer. Before everything became routine. Before she became furniture. The house was built in 1889. Eleanor began walking deeper into the foyer. Her voice took on the cadence of a professional tour. But underneath it was something else. Something sharper. Walter Ashworth commissioned it for his wife Cecilia as a gift. How romantic. Simone said. It was intended to be. Eleanor did not turn around. She kept walking toward the main parlor. The reality was more complicated. The tour unfolded with a precision Eleanor brought to everything she did. She showed them the formal parlor with its original plasterwork ceiling. The library with built-in shelving that held books Cecilia had collected over 40 years. The dining room that could seat 24. The morning room where Cecilia had taken her breakfast alone because Walter preferred to eat in his study. She explained the architectural details, the preservation requirements, the renovations that had been done and the ones that had been rejected because the trust wanted authenticity over convenience. And with each room Henry grew quieter. He was watching Eleanor. Not the house. Not Simone. His wife. She could feel his attention on her back like a weight. Could feel him reassessing. Recalculating. Understanding for the first time that the woman he had dismissed for 24 years knew things he had never bothered to learn. This is the conservatory. Eleanor opened double doors onto a glass-walled room filled with winter light. It was Cecilia's studio. The space was beautiful. High ceilings. Windows on 3 sides. A view of gardens that would bloom spectacular in spring. She drew plants here? Simone asked. She was a botanical illustrator. Eleanor walked to the windows. Her work is still considered definitive in several scientific fields. Museums have exhibitions of her drawings. Like an artist. Like a scientist. Eleanor turned. She documented plant species with a precision that modern photography cannot match. Her illustrations are still used for identification in academic settings. Henry was very still. I did not know that, he said. Eleanor looked at him. Held his gaze. Let the silence stretch. Most people do not. Walter certainly did not. He introduced her at parties as my wife. She likes to draw flowers. The parallel hung in the air. Simone did not catch it. But Henry did. His face had gone slightly pale. That is sad. Simone walked to the windows. Looking out at the gardens. She should have been appreciated. She should have been seen. Eleanor said quietly. There is a difference. The tour continued. Eleanor showed them the kitchen. The staff quarters that had been converted into guest suites. The wine cellar that still held bottles from Cecilia's time. And then she took them upstairs. The master suite was magnificent. Original woodwork. A fireplace that still functioned. Windows that overlooked the garden Cecilia had designed and Walter had paid for without ever understanding why they mattered to her. I want to see the nursery. Simone's hand went to her belly again. For the baby. Eleanor's chest tightened. But her face remained perfectly calm. Of course. This way. The nursery wing was at the end of the second-floor hallway. 3 connected rooms. A day nursery. A night nursery. A nanny's quarters. Cecilia had prepared these rooms with such hope. Had painted the walls herself. Had embroidered linens that still sat folded in cedar chests. Had imagined children that never came. She and Walter never had children. Eleanor said as they walked through the doorway. She prepared these rooms when they were first married. But the children she hoped for did not arrive. Simone moved through the space with proprietary attention. Already planning. Already imagining her son in these rooms. It is perfect. She turned to Henry. Her face was radiant. I can see him here. Our son. Growing up in these rooms. Our son. The words landed in Eleanor's chest like stones dropped into water. The ripples spread outward. Touching everything. Henry's son. Growing up in a house built on betrayal. In rooms prepared by a woman whose husband never saw her. In a nursery designed for children who were never born because Walter was too busy looking elsewhere to notice what was happening in his own home. The irony was so complete it almost seemed intentional. Henry was looking at Eleanor. His expression was complicated. Discomfort. Concern. Something that might have been the beginning of shame. It is lovely, he said. And his voice was strange. Tight. Eleanor let them look. Let them imagine. Let them plan their future in this space that carried so much history they did not understand. And then she said the thing she had been waiting to say. There is something else you should know about this property. Simone turned. What? The sale is controlled by a family trust. Eleanor's voice was perfectly steady. The trustees have specific requirements for any buyer. Requirements that go beyond price. What kind of requirements? Personal ones. Eleanor looked at Henry. Not Simone. Henry. They want to know that whoever purchases this house understands its history. That they will not repeat the patterns that marked its past. What patterns? Walter Ashworth was unfaithful to his wife. The words dropped into the room like a stone into still water. He had an affair with a younger woman. Eleanor continued. He planned to buy her a house. A property that would set her up in the style to which she wished to become accustomed. He thought Cecilia would never know. That she was too busy with her drawings to notice where his attention had wandered. She noticed. Simone said it quietly. She noticed. Eleanor confirmed. And when she was certain of what was happening, she made arrangements. Quietly. Without confrontation. She transferred her inheritance into accounts he could not touch. She documented everything. And when she was ready, she left. Just like that. Just like that. She walked away from this house and everything in it. She took only what belonged to her. Her money. Her illustrations. Her reputation. And she built a life that outlasted his in every way that mattered. Henry had gone completely still. His face was the color of old paper. What happened to Walter? He died here. Alone. In the house he had built for a woman he never bothered to see. Surrounded by everything he had given her except the one thing she actually wanted. Which was to be known. The silence stretched. Eleanor let it stretch. Let the words settle. Let the history speak for itself. Simone was looking between Eleanor and Henry now. Her sharp eyes were beginning to see something. Beginning to understand that this conversation had layers she had not been invited to. The trustees. She said slowly. What do they actually require? They require my recommendation. Eleanor said. I am the only consultant they will work with. The only person they trust to evaluate whether a potential buyer will honor Cecilia's legacy. And what does that mean? Honoring her legacy. It means not using this house to repeat the pattern that built it. Eleanor looked at Henry. Held his gaze. Did not look away. It means not buying this property as a gift for a mistress while a wife sits at home wondering why her husband has stopped seeing her. The garden was cold. February air cut through Eleanor's coat as she walked the gravel paths that wound between dormant rose bushes and empty fountain basins. Behind her the house rose like a monument. Beautiful. Terrible. Full of ghosts. Simone had excused herself to use the bathroom. Henry had followed Eleanor outside. His footsteps crunched on gravel. His breathing was slightly labored. From cold or from something else. What are you doing? His voice came from behind her. Close. Tight. Eleanor did not turn around. I am showing you a property. As requested. You are making this impossible. I am being thorough. The trust requires thoroughness. Eleanor. Now she turned. And she saw something on his face she had not seen in years. Something that might have been fear. You are my husband. The words came out before she could stop them. 24 years of silence breaking open like a dam. You are my husband. And you brought your pregnant girlfriend to my office. You asked for whoever handles exclusive properties as though I was interchangeable with any other service provider. You did not introduce me. You did not acknowledge me. You stood in the firm I built from nothing and you were genuinely surprised to learn that I handle these kinds of acquisitions. I did not know you had this listing. You do not know anything about me. You have not asked about my work in years. You have never visited my office. You have never attended a single one of my professional events. You introduced me at your company gala last month as my wife. She helps people find houses as though I sell starter homes in the suburbs instead of estates worth more than your company's quarterly earnings. Eleanor. Do not. Her voice was sharp now. The control cracking. Do not say my name like that. Like you are trying to manage me. Like I am being unreasonable for having feelings about my husband buying his pregnant mistress a $14 million house. Henry's face was pale. His hands hung at his sides. He looked lost. Untethered. Like a man who had been walking a path he thought was solid and suddenly discovered nothing but air beneath his feet. It was not supposed to happen this way. How was it supposed to happen? Eleanor asked. You were going to install her in this house. Give her everything she wanted. And what was I supposed to do? Stay home and wait. Pretend I did not notice that you had replaced me. I was going to tell you. When? After. After what? After Valentine's Day. After the baby was born. After you had built an entire separate life that did not include me. He had no answer. Eleanor looked at this man she had loved for 24 years. This man she had accommodated and supported and made herself smaller for. This man who had never once asked her what she needed. Who had taken her devotion as his due without ever wondering what it cost her to give it. She had been disappearing for years. Erasing herself in increments. Becoming less and less so that he could feel like more and more. And he had not noticed. Had not noticed because he was not looking. Because he had stopped looking so long ago that he could not even remember what he was supposed to see. You came to my office. She said it quietly. Her voice steady now. The anger fading into something colder. Something clearer. You brought her to my professional space. You asked me to help you betray me. And you did not even know that what you were asking was impossible. What do you mean? I mean that this sale will not happen. I am the only consultant the trust will work with. My recommendation is required. And I will not recommend a buyer who represents exactly what Cecilia Ashworth spent her life escaping. You cannot. I can. It is my professional prerogative. It is my ethical obligation. It is the one thing in this situation that I actually control. Eleanor. No. She shook her head. You do not get to Eleanor me out of this. You do not get to use my name like a magic word that makes everything better. You have been using my name for 24 years without ever learning what it meant. And I am finished. I am finished being convenient. I am finished being accommodation. I am finished making myself invisible so you can feel like the only thing in the room worth seeing. Henry stood very still. His breath made small clouds in the cold air. His eyes were wet. She did not know if it was the cold or something else. She did not care. I loved you. The words left her mouth and she heard them as though someone else was speaking. Past tense. Loved. Not love. I loved you and I made myself into whatever you needed me to be. I thought that was what marriage meant. I thought devotion looked like accommodation. I thought if I just gave enough eventually you would turn around and see what you had. But you never turned around. You just kept looking somewhere else. And I stayed behind you. Following. Hoping. Shrinking. I did not mean. I know. She cut him off. I know you did not mean to hurt me. That is almost the worst part. You did not think about me enough to mean anything at all. I was just there. Background. Furniture. Something you expected to be waiting whenever you decided to come home. That is not. Tell me something about my work. One thing. One deal I closed this year. One client I served. One property I sold. Anything that proves you have been paying attention to who I am when I'm not standing next to you. Silence. You cannot. Because you do not know. Because you have never asked. Because you decided 20 years ago that what I do does not matter and you have never updated that assessment. Henry's mouth opened. Closed. No words came out. You are going to go back inside. Eleanor said. You are going to tell Simone that the viewing is complete. You are going to drive back to the city. And you are going to give me space to decide what I want my life to look like. And if I do not, then I will tell her who I am. I will explain that you brought your wife to show your mistress the house you wanted to buy her. And I will let her decide whether she wants to build a future with a man who uses women as instruments without ever seeing them as people. Henry's face collapsed. All the control. All the confidence. All the certainty that had carried him through 55 years of getting what he wanted. Gone. Please. Go inside. Eleanor turned away from him. Walk back toward the fountain where Cecilia used to sit and draw the roses that bloomed here every spring. Tell her it is time to leave. She heard his footsteps retreat across the gravel. She stood alone in the garden with the cold February air cutting through her coat and felt something inside her crack open. Not breaking. Something else. Something that felt almost like freedom. The drive back to the city was silent. Eleanor followed the route she had memorized years ago. Past bare winter fields and small towns that had not changed in decades. through countryside that Cecilia Ashworth had once painted when she still believed her husband might learn to see her. Henry's Range Rover stayed close behind her. She could see Simone's silhouette in the passenger seat. Could imagine the questions being asked. The explanations being offered. The lies being told. What had he said to her? What excuse had he given for cutting the viewing short? Did it matter? Nothing he said would change what Eleanor had decided. Nothing he offered would undo the years of not being seen. She had spent 24 years building a bridge to a man who was not standing on the other side. Who had never been standing on the other side. Who had taken her construction materials and used them to build something for himself without ever wondering who had provided them. The bridge was finished. She was finished building it. Her office appeared through the windshield. The building where she had spent 3 decades creating something real. Something that mattered. Something that existed independent of Henry's attention or approval. He had never visited this building. Had never walked through those doors. Had never seen the name she had put on the glass or the people who worked for her or the clients who flew across oceans for her expertise. He had been married to a stranger. And he had not known it. She parked in her usual spot. Got out of the car. Walked to the entrance without looking back. Behind her the Range Rover pulled into a visitor space. Doors opened. Footsteps approached. She did not wait. The conference room was cold. Eleanor had asked Delia to turn down the thermostat. A small thing. A petty thing perhaps. But she wanted Henry and Simone to be uncomfortable. Wanted them to feel the chill that had settled into her chest and would not leave. They sat on one side of the long table. She sat on the other. Between them paperwork. Stacks of it. Purchase agreements. Trust requirements. Financial disclosure forms. All the documentation that a $14 million acquisition required. We need to discuss the process. Eleanor's voice was professional. Clipped. I am required to conduct a full evaluation of any potential buyer before making a recommendation to the trust. Simone leaned forward. We have already seen the house. We want it. Wanting is not enough. The trustees have specific concerns. I need to address those concerns before the sale can proceed. What concerns? Eleanor looked at her. This woman who was carrying Henry's child. This woman who believed she had won something by taking another woman's husband. The property was built as a gift for a wife who was subsequently betrayed by her husband. The trust exists specifically to prevent that pattern from repeating. They will want assurance that the purchase is being made in good faith. That it represents a genuine commitment rather than a temporary arrangement. Simone's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting? I am explaining the requirements. Eleanor cut her off. The trust will want documentation of the nature of your relationship. The source of funds for the purchase. The long-term plans for the property. These are standard requests for acquisitions of this significance. Simone looked at Henry. He had been silent since they returned. His face was grey. His eyes were fixed on the table. Henry will provide whatever documentation is necessary. Then I will need Mr. Prescott's financial statements. Eleanor used his surname deliberately. Proof of liquid assets or mortgage pre-approval. Evidence that he is the primary funder and clarification of how the title will be structured. I will be on the title. Simone said quickly. In my name alone. So Mr. Prescott is funding a purchase that will be held exclusively in your name. Is that a problem? It requires additional documentation. The trust will want to understand why a $14 million asset is being purchased by one party but titled to another. That arrangement raises questions about the nature of the transaction. Simone's expression hardened. What kind of questions? Questions about whether this is a genuine home purchase or something else entirely. The room fell silent. Eleanor watched Simone processing. Watched the sharp intelligence behind those careful eyes working through possibilities. Understanding that something was wrong. Something she had not been told. Henry. Simone turned to him. What is going on? He did not answer. Henry. The trust has requirements. He said finally. His voice was hollow. Eleanor is doing her job. Her job. Simone looked at Eleanor. Really looked. For the first time since they had arrived. Who exactly are you? The question hung in the air. Eleanor could answer it now. Could say, "I am his wife." Could watch Simone's face transform. Could end this entire charade with 3 words. But she did not want to end it. Not yet. Not until she had shown Henry exactly what his dismissal had cost him. "I am the only person who can approve this sale," Eleanor said. "And I am not certain I am going to." On what grounds? On the grounds that the trust requires transparency. And there are elements of this transaction that lack transparency. Such as the nature of your relationship with Mr. Prescott. Such as the timing of this purchase. Such as the fact that you are 6 months pregnant and this property is being presented as a Valentine's Day gift from a man whose marital status remains unclear. Simone went very still. His marital status. Eleanor looked at Henry. Held his gaze. Gave him one final chance to tell the truth himself. He said nothing. "Mr. Prescott," Eleanor said, "would you like to clarify your marital status for the record?" The silence stretched. Simone's face was beginning to change. The confidence fading. The certainty crumbling. Henry. He looked at her. At the woman carrying his child. At the woman he had promised this house and this future and this escape from a marriage he had stopped caring about years ago. And Eleanor saw something she had not expected. She saw a coward. He could not even tell the truth. Could not even give Simone the dignity of hearing it from him. He was going to sit there in silence and let Eleanor do this for him too. "I am his wife." The words left Eleanor's mouth with perfect calm. "I am Henry Prescott's wife of 24 years. The woman he has been married to while conducting an affair with you. The woman he brought to this office expecting me to help him purchase a house for his pregnant mistress without even knowing that I was capable of helping anyone with anything because he has not paid attention to me in so long he forgot I existed." Simone's face went white. "He told me." "What did he tell you?" "That his marriage was over. That they were separated. That the divorce was just paperwork waiting to be signed." The lies landed like blows. Not because they hurt. Eleanor was past being hurt by Henry's lies. But because they confirmed everything. Every suspicion. Every fear. Every quiet voice in the back of her mind that had been telling her for years that something was wrong. He lied. Of course he lied. He has been lying for as long as I have known him. To me. To himself. To anyone who gets close enough to expect truth. Simone stood. Her chair scraped against the floor. Her hands were shaking. "I did not know. I believe you." Eleanor meant it. Looking at Simone now she saw not a villain but a victim. Another woman used by a man who could not see past his own needs. "I am sorry," Eleanor said. "Not for stopping this sale. But for what you are about to discover about the man you thought you knew." Simone looked at Henry. He sat there. Silent. Grey. Defeated. "Is it true?" He could not answer. "Is it true?" Her voice rose. "Are you married? Have you been married this entire time?" "Simone. Answer me." "Yes." The word was barely a whisper. "Yes, I am married." Simone's hand went to her belly. To the child growing there. To the future she had been building on a foundation of lies. "And Eleanor. She is your wife." "Yes." "The wife you told me did not understand you. The wife you said had become more like a roommate than a partner. The wife who supposedly gave up on the marriage years ago." "Yes." Simone laughed. A short sharp sound with no humor in it. "She runs this company. She was going to sell me a $14 million house. And you let her do it. You stood there and watched her show me around a property you wanted to buy me and you said nothing. I did not know she handled this listing. You did not know what your own wife does for a living." The accusation landed with devastating precision. Because it was true. Because even Simone could see how damning that was. Because a man who did not know his wife well enough to know her job did not know his wife at all. "I am leaving." Simone gathered her coat. Her bag. The pieces of herself she could still carry. "I am leaving and I am going to find somewhere to think about what I have done and who I have done it with and what kind of future I thought I was building." "Simone, wait." Henry stood. Reached for her arm. She pulled back like his touch burned. Do not touch me. Do not speak to me. Do not contact me until I am ready to hear whatever explanation you think you can offer. The baby. The baby is mine. She said it fiercely. Whatever else happens, this baby is mine, and I will decide what is best for him. Not you. She walked to the door, paused, looked back at Eleanor. I am sorry for what my part in this did to your marriage. Eleanor nodded. Our marriage was already broken. You just made it visible. Simone left. The door closed behind her, and Eleanor was alone with her husband for the first time since she understood who he really was. Henry sat at the conference table. His head was in his hands. His shoulders were shaking. Whether from grief or fear or simple exhaustion, Eleanor could not tell. She did not care. Eleanor. No. Please let me. There is nothing you can say. Eleanor gathered the unsigned paperwork, stacked it neatly, a task for her hands while her heart finished breaking. There is nothing you can offer. No explanation that makes this acceptable. No apology that undoes 24 years of not being seen. I did see you. You saw a version of me that was convenient for you. The version that made no demands, required no attention, asked for nothing except your presence, which you gave less and less of as time went on. That is not fair. What is not fair is spending half my life with a man who did not know what I did for a living. What is not fair is making myself smaller and quieter and less visible year after year because I thought that was what marriage required. What is not fair is discovering that while I was disappearing for you, you were building a life with someone else. Henry looked up. His eyes were red. His face was wet. She felt nothing. I loved you, he said. You loved what I provided. Stability. Support. Someone to come home to when you felt like coming home. That is not love. That is convenience. Eleanor, I want you to leave this office. I want you to find somewhere else to stay tonight. I want time and space to decide what happens next. You are throwing me out. I am setting a boundary. For the first time in 24 years. I am telling you what I need instead of waiting for you to guess. He stared at her. This woman he had married. This woman he had dismissed. This woman who was standing in her own office wearing her own authority like armor he had never known she possessed. She was magnificent. She had always been magnificent. And he had never looked closely enough to see it. I will go to the downtown apartment. Fine. Eleanor, we can work through this. She laughed. A sound that carried no amusement at all. Work through what? Your affair. Your child with another woman. 24 years of treating me like furniture. Which part exactly do you think we can work through? He had no answer. Goodbye, Henry. She walked to the door. Held it open. He rose slowly. Gathered himself. Passed through the doorway without meeting her eyes. And Eleanor closed the door behind him. The office was silent. Delia appeared a moment later. Her face was soft with concern. Are you okay? No. Eleanor sank into a chair. I do not think I have been okay for a very long time. I just did not let myself know it. What happens now? Now I go home. I stand in the space that used to be ours and I let myself feel everything I have been holding back. And tomorrow I decide what kind of life I want to build. Do you want company? No. Eleanor shook her head. I think I need to learn how to be alone. I have been so busy being his wife that I forgot how to be just Eleanor. Delia crossed to her. Placed a hand on her shoulder. You are going to be okay. Not right away. Not easily. But you are going to be okay. Eleanor put her hand over Delia's. Squeezed. I know. And for the first time since Henry had walked through her door with Simone at his side, she felt something that was not grief or anger or the hollow ache of betrayal. She felt the beginning of something else. Something that felt almost like hope. The penthouse was dark when Eleanor arrived home. She had lived in this space for 12 years. Had decorated every room. Had chosen every piece of furniture. Had made it beautiful because that was what she did. Because she understood how to create environments that reflected the people who lived in them. But standing in the doorway now she realized she had never made this space reflect herself. She had made it reflect Henry. His taste. His preferences. His need for clean lines and neutral colors and nothing that drew too much attention. She had decorated her own home the way she had decorated her own life. Accommodating him. The kitchen was empty. The bedroom was empty. The study where Henry spent his evenings was empty. She walked through each room like a ghost, touching surfaces she had chosen, looking at art she had purchased, remembering all the time she had moved through these spaces waiting for him to come home. How many hours had she spent waiting? How many evenings had she sat alone in this beautiful empty penthouse wondering when he would return and whether he would notice her when he did? How much of her life had she spent hoping for attention from a man who had stopped giving it? The answer was too large to comprehend, too heavy to carry. So she set it down. She poured a glass of wine. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows. She looked out at the city lights and let herself feel everything she had been controlling for 2 days. The hurt, the betrayal, the humiliation. But underneath all of it something else. Something unexpected. Relief. She did not have to pretend anymore. Did not have to hope anymore. Did not have to lie to herself about what her marriage was and what it would never become. The truth had arrived. Ugly and painful and undeniable. And the truth had set her free. Behind her the phone rang. She did not answer. It rang again. And again. Henry's name on the screen. Henry's voice if she picked up. Henry's excuses and explanations and requests for another chance. She turned the phone off. Tomorrow she would deal with lawyers. Finances. The practical details of dismantling a life. But tonight she would stand alone in her own home and let herself grieve. Not for Henry. Not for the marriage. Not for the 24 years she had spent disappearing. For the woman she used to be. Before she learned to make herself small. That woman had been remarkable. Talented. Full of possibilities. That woman had been lost somewhere along the way. Buried beneath accommodations and compromises and the slow erosion of self. But she was not gone. Eleanor could feel her stirring. Like a creature waking from a long hibernation. Stretching. Remembering what it felt like to take up space. She was going to find that woman again. She was going to rebuild herself piece by piece. Reclaim every part of herself that she had given away. And she was never going to disappear again. Outside the windows the city sparkled. Indifferent to her pain. Beautiful regardless of what was happening inside the walls of expensive apartments. Life would continue. She would continue. Different. Wounded. But finally awake. Eleanor lifted her glass. To Cecilia Ashworth. She said quietly. To the women who refused to vanish. The wine was bitter on her tongue. But underneath the bitterness something else. The first sweet taste of freedom. And the story was far from over. The morning arrived whether Eleanor was ready for it or not. She woke in the center of the bed she had shared with Henry for 12 years. The sheets on his side were cold. Untouched. He had not come home in the night. Had not tried to slip back in after she fell asleep. Had actually listened for once. The irony was not lost on her. 24 years of hoping he would hear her. 24 years of wishing he would pay attention to what she needed. And the first time he actually listened was when she told him to leave. The bedroom was grey with early February light. Outside the windows the city was waking. Traffic sounds rising. The world continuing its rotation regardless of what had happened inside these walls. Eleanor lay still for a long moment. Testing herself. Waiting to see what she felt. Grief was there. A hollow ache in her chest that pulsed with every heartbeat. The loss of something she had believed in even when she should have stopped believing. The death of a hope she had carried for so long it had become part of her skeleton. But underneath the grief something else. Clarity. For the first time in years she could see her life without the fog of accommodation obscuring the view. Could see what she had given up. What she had tolerated. What she had allowed to happen to herself in the name of keeping a marriage alive that had been dead for longer than she wanted to admit. The clarity hurt. But it was clean pain. Honest pain. The kind that came from finally looking at a wound instead of pretending it did not exist. She rose. Showered. Dressed in clothes she chose for herself instead of for how they would look beside Henry at whatever function he had scheduled. A soft sweater. Dark trousers. Comfortable shoes. No performance today. No mask. Just Eleanor. The kitchen was silent as she made coffee. The sound of the machine felt loud in the emptiness. She had lived with background noise for so long. Henry's phone calls. His keyboard clicking. His presence filling space even when he was not paying attention to her. The silence was strange. Uncomfortable. But it was hers. Her phone sat on the counter where she had left it the night before. She turned it on and watched the notifications flood the screen. 17 missed calls from Henry. 12 text messages. 3 voicemails. She did not listen to any of them. Instead she scrolled to a different contact. Pressed call. Delia answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you would call. How are you? I do not know yet. Eleanor carried her coffee to the window. I think I am still in shock. But I slept. That seems like a good sign. It is. Sleep means your body is processing. What do you need today? I need to come to the office. I need to work. I need to remember who I am when I am not being his wife. I will have everything ready. Take your time. The call ended. Eleanor stood at the window and watched the city wake up below her. All those people moving through their days. All those lives intersecting and separating and continuing. She was going to be one of them now. A person moving through her own life instead of orbiting someone else's. It was terrifying. It was exactly what she needed. The office felt different when Eleanor arrived. Not physically different. The same reception area. The same conference rooms. The same hallway leading to her corner office with its view of the city she had conquered property by property over 30 years. But something had shifted. She had stopped pretending. Delia met her at the elevator with a cup of tea and an expression of careful concern. He called here. Twice. I told him you were unavailable. Good. He asked if you would take a meeting with him. Said it was urgent. Everything is urgent to Henry. That does not mean it is important to me. They walked together toward Eleanor's office. Past colleagues who looked up with curiosity in their eyes. Word had spread. Of course it had. The scene in the conference room. Simone's dramatic exit. Henry's grey-faced departure. Everyone knew something had happened. They just did not know what. Eleanor did not explain. Did not feel obligated to. Her personal life was her own even if pieces of it had spilled into her professional space. She closed her office door and stood for a moment. Breathing. Centering. This room was hers. This career was hers. This identity that had nothing to do with Henry Prescott or his name or his money or his attention. She had maintained it even while erasing herself everywhere else. Now it was time to let this version of herself expand. To fill all the spaces she had vacated. To become whole again. Her computer chimed. An email from the Ashworth House Trust Coordinator. Dear Mrs. Mercer. We heard there was a complication with the potential buyer yesterday. We wanted to confirm the property remains available and that you are well. Please advise on next steps. The trustees remain committed to finding the right custodian for Cecilia's legacy. Eleanor read the message twice. They had heard. Through the professional network that connected everyone in her world. Through the whispers that traveled faster than formal communication. They knew something had happened. And they were checking on her. She typed a response. The buyer was not an appropriate match for the property. The listing remains active. I will personally ensure Ashworth House finds a custodian worthy of its history. Thank you for your concern. I am well. She hit send. And she meant it. She was well. Or she would be. Eventually. After the grief finished working its way through her system. After she learned how to live in the space Henry's absence had created. But she was standing. Working. Functioning. That was more than she had expected. The financial advisor called at 11:15. Eleanor saw Richard Thornton's name on her phone and knew immediately what this call would be about. Richard had managed her and Henry's combined assets for 18 years. He knew their portfolio intimately. He knew every account and investment and trust structure. And he would know if Henry tried to move money without her authorization. Eleanor. Richard's voice was careful. Professional but warm. I am calling about an unusual request. Tell me. Henry submitted paperwork this morning for a transfer of $14 million from your joint investment accounts. Given the size and timing of the request, I wanted to verify that you are aware and that you approve. Eleanor's grip tightened on the phone. $14 million. The exact price of Ashworth House. Henry was still trying to complete the purchase. Still trying to give Simone the house even after everything that had happened. Or perhaps he thought if he secured the house he could win her back. Could prove his commitment. Could salvage something from the wreckage he had created. I am not aware of this transfer. Eleanor's voice was steady. I do not approve it. Understood. I will decline the request. Please also flag our accounts for dual authorization on any transactions over $50,000 moving forward. Nothing moves without both signatures until further notice. Richard paused. I understand. Eleanor, if there is anything else I can do. There will be. Soon. I will need to schedule a meeting to discuss restructuring our finances. But not today. Today I just need to make sure he cannot access anything without my knowledge. Consider it done. The call ended. Eleanor sat very still. He was still trying. Even now. Even after watching Simone walk away. Even after seeing his marriage exposed for the hollow thing it was. He was still trying to buy his way out of consequences. She should not have been surprised. This was who Henry had always been. A man who believed that money could solve anything. That grand gestures could substitute for genuine attention. That things could replace the hard work of actually seeing another person. He had learned nothing. Perhaps he was incapable of learning. But that was no longer her problem. She had protected herself. Blocked the transfer. Established boundaries he could not cross without her consent. For the first time in 24 years she had power over their shared life. It felt strange. Uncomfortable. Like wearing clothes that did not quite fit. But it also felt necessary. The afternoon brought work. Real work. The kind that had sustained Eleanor through decades of building something that mattered. Clients called with questions. Properties required attention. Negotiations needed her expertise. She moved through it all with the precision she had always brought to her profession. The part of herself that had never diminished. The part Henry had never bothered to notice. At 3:15 her phone rang. Simone Aldridge. Eleanor stared at the name on the screen. Considered not answering. Decided that avoidance was its own kind of cowardice. She picked up. Eleanor Mercer. It is Simone. Simone's voice was different than it had been yesterday. Smaller. Less certain. I know I probably should not be calling, but I did not know who else to talk to. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. What do you need? I need to understand. What he told me. What was true and what was lies. I have been going through everything in my head and I cannot tell anymore. What did he tell you? That you were separated. That the marriage was over in everything but paperwork. That you had an arrangement. You lived your lives independently and the divorce was just waiting for the right time. None of that was true. I know that now. But I believed it. For 10 months I believed every word. Does that make me stupid? Eleanor considered the question. Considered the woman on the other end of the line. Young. Pregnant. Alone with a future that had suddenly become uncertain. It makes you human. Eleanor said. Henry is very good at making people believe what he wants them to believe. I believed him for 24 years. Silence on the line. What are you going to do? Simone asked finally. Divorce him. Rebuild my life. Remember who I was before I spent 2 decades disappearing. And me. What happens to me? That is not my decision to make. You are carrying his child. That creates obligations he cannot avoid regardless of what happens between him and me. What you do with that is up to you. He keeps calling. Saying we can work it out. That the house does not matter. That he will find another way to prove his commitment. Eleanor almost laughed. He tried to transfer the money this morning. $14 million. I blocked it. He what? He was still trying to buy you Ashworth House. Even after yesterday. Even after you walked out. He thought if he could secure the property he could win you back. The silence stretched longer this time. That is insane. That is Henry. He does not understand that some things cannot be purchased. He never has. Simone made a sound that might have been a sob or might have been a laugh. I thought he loved me. I thought I was special. Different from whatever he had at home. You were different. You were new. You paid attention to him in ways I had stopped doing because he never paid attention back. That is not love. That is novelty. Then what am I supposed to do? You are supposed to figure out what you want. Not what he promised you. Not what you imagined your life would be. What you actually want now that you know what is real. And the baby. The baby did not choose any of this. The baby deserves parents who can see clearly even if they cannot be together. That is all any child deserves. Simone was crying now. Eleanor could hear it through the phone. The quiet shaking breaths of a woman whose world had collapsed. I am sorry, Simone said. For my part in this. For believing him. For not asking more questions. I know. Does that make it better? No. But it makes it honest. And honest is where we have to start. The call ended a few minutes later. Eleanor sat in the silence of her office and felt something unexpected. Pity. Not for herself. Not anymore. But for Simone. For the woman who had believed Henry's lies because she wanted them to be true. For the mother who would have to explain to her child someday why his father could not be trusted. Henry had left wreckage everywhere. In his marriage. In his affair. In the lives of everyone who had been foolish enough to believe his words meant something. But the wreckage was not Eleanor's to clean up. Not all of it. She could only tend to her own ruins. Could only rebuild her own life. The rest would have to sort itself out. 3 days passed. Eleanor worked. Ate. Slept. Moved through the motions of a life that was slowly becoming her own again. Henry called constantly. She did not answer. He sent emails. She did not read them. He showed up at her office once. Delia turned him away at reception with the polished professionalism of someone who had been waiting years for the opportunity. The penthouse felt less empty with each passing day. Or perhaps Eleanor was simply learning to fill it with herself instead of waiting for someone else to arrive. She rearranged the furniture. Moved a chair to a spot where she could watch the sunrise instead of facing the door. Hung a painting she had bought years ago and never displayed because Henry said it was too colorful for their aesthetic. Small rebellions. Tiny reclamations. But they added up. On the 4th day her attorney called. Margaret Chen had been Eleanor's lawyer for 15 years. Had handled her business contracts. Her property acquisitions. The legal architecture of a career built on precision and expertise. Now she would handle Eleanor's divorce. I have reviewed everything. Margaret's voice was crisp. Efficient. You are in an excellent position. Tell me. The prenuptial agreement is solid. Your assets acquired before the marriage remain yours entirely. Your business is protected. The only complication is the joint assets accumulated during the marriage. How much? Approximately 60 million in combined investments. Properties. Holdings. You are entitled to half under state law. More if we can demonstrate dissipation of marital assets. Dissipation. He was transferring money to fund a property purchase for his mistress. That is textbook dissipation. We can argue for a larger share based on his attempt to redirect marital funds for personal benefit. Eleanor considered this. I do not want to fight over money. I want this to be clean. Fast. Final. I understand. But you should not leave value on the table because you want to be done quickly. He has an obligation to account for what he did. Then document everything. The attempted transfer. The affair. The pregnancy. Put it all in writing. But do not use it as a weapon. Use it as protection. I want him to understand that I could destroy him if I chose to. And then I want to walk away. Margaret was quiet for a moment. That is remarkably restrained. I have spent 24 years being accommodating. I am done with that. But I am also done letting him take up space in my mind. I want my life back. A protracted legal battle does not give me my life back. It keeps me tied to him. Understood. I will draft the papers. We can file by end of week. Good. Eleanor hung up. End of week. By Friday, she would have officially begun the process of legally separating herself from Henry Prescott. 24 years reduced to paperwork. It should have felt sadder than it did. The email about Ashworth House arrived on a Thursday morning. Eleanor saw the trust coordinator's name in her inbox and felt her pulse quicken. She had been waiting for this. Hoping for it. Dear Mrs. Mercer, the trustees have reviewed the situation with the previous potential buyer and wish to express their support for your handling of the matter. They remain committed to finding the right custodian for the property and would like to discuss an interesting development. A new buyer has emerged. Someone they believe you will find most appropriate. Please call at your earliest convenience. Eleanor called immediately. The coordinator's name was Patricia Waverley, 73 years old. A distant cousin of the Ashworth family who had taken on stewardship of Cecilia's legacy decades ago. Eleanor. Patricia's voice was warm. I heard what happened. The whole story. I am so sorry. Thank you. But I did not call to discuss my personal situation. Tell me about this buyer. A woman named Dr. Grace Okwu. She is a professor of botanical science at the university. She has spent her career studying the very specimens Cecilia Ashworth documented. She wants to establish a research center and artist residency at the property. A place where scientists and artists can work together the way Cecilia believed they should. Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest. That sounds perfect. It is perfect. It is exactly what Cecilia would have wanted. But there is a complication. Of course there is. Dr. Okwu cannot afford $14 million. She has grants and institutional backing, but the total comes to approximately $9 million. The trustees are debating whether to accept the lower offer. And what do you think? I think Cecilia would have cared more about legacy than profit. I think she would have wanted her home to serve a purpose that honored her work. But I am only one voice among many. Let me speak to the trustees. Eleanor was already pulling up her calendar. I will make the case myself. You would do that. I would do more than that. This is exactly the outcome Ashworth House deserves. After everything that has happened, I want to see something good come from that property. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Eleanor spent the weekend preparing. Not just the professional case for accepting Dr. Okwu's offer, but something else. Something more personal. She went through her files on Ashworth House. The history she had compiled over 3 years. The letters Cecilia had written. The documentation of her work and her marriage and her eventual liberation. And she found something she had never noticed before. A letter from Cecilia to her sister. Written 6 months after she left Walter. Tucked into a folder of miscellaneous correspondence that Eleanor had skimmed but never studied carefully. Dearest Helen. You ask if I regret leaving. I do not. I regret the years I spent trying to be seen by a man who could not see anything smaller than his own reflection. I regret the parts of myself I set aside because they did not fit his vision of what a wife should be. I regret the silence. The accommodation. The slow erasure of everything I was. But I do not regret walking away. I am told he sits in the house he built for me. Surrounded by everything he gave me except the one thing I wanted. I hope he finds peace eventually. I hope he learns to see clearly before he dies. But I cannot teach him. I tried for 15 years and he learned nothing. Some people are incapable of seeing what is right in front of them. All I can do is live my own life. Do my own work. Become again the woman I was before I met him. That is enough. That is everything. Eleanor read the letter 3 times. Then she closed the folder and wept. Not for Cecilia. Cecilia had survived. Had thrived. Had built a legacy that outlasted the man who never deserved her. Eleanor wept for herself. For the recognition. For the mirror she had not known she was looking into. For the woman who had written those words 130 years ago and somehow reached across time to speak directly to Eleanor's breaking heart. Some people are incapable of seeing what is right in front of them. All I can do is live my own life. That is enough. That is everything. The trustees met in a law office downtown. 7 people around a mahogany table. descendants and caretakers and legal representatives of a family trust that had protected Cecilia Ashworth's legacy for more than a century. Eleanor presented her case with the precision that had made her career. She showed them Dr. Okwu's credentials, the proposed research center, the artist residency program, the plans to restore Cecilia's studio and make it available for working scientists and illustrators. She showed them letters of support from institutions around the world, museums that wanted to partner with the center, universities that wanted to send scholars, foundations that wanted to provide funding. And then she showed them something else. Cecilia's letter to her sister. She read it aloud. Let the words fill the room. Let the trustees hear their ancestor speaking across the decades about what mattered and what did not. Cecilia wanted to be seen. Eleanor said when she finished. She wanted her work to matter. She wanted her life to mean something beyond the house her husband built to apologize for not loving her properly. Dr. Okwu sees her. This proposal sees her. The research center will ensure that Cecilia's work continues to matter for generations. $14 million is just money. What Dr. Okwu is offering is legacy. The room was silent. Patricia Waverley spoke first. I move that we accept Dr. Okwu's offer at $9 million. Subject to the conditions Mrs. Mercer has outlined regarding the preservation and purpose of the property. Seconded. Another trustee. A man in his 60s whose eyes were bright with emotion. The vote was unanimous. Ashworth House would become what Cecilia would have wanted. A place where work like hers could continue. Where women and men who saw the world clearly could gather and create and matter. Eleanor drove back to her office with Cecilia's letter on the seat beside her. She had facilitated a lot of transactions in her career. Properties worth more than this one. Deals with more complicated structures. Negotiations that had required every ounce of her skill. But none of them had felt like this. This felt like redemption. The divorce papers arrived on a Friday afternoon. Eleanor's attorney had worked quickly, had compiled everything, had created a document that reflected 24 years of marriage and the terms under which it would end. She read through every page. The division of assets was clean. Half of their joint holdings went to each party. The penthouse would be sold and proceeds split. Their separate assets remained separate. There were no disputes over custody because there were no children. There was nothing to fight over except pride. And Eleanor had stopped caring about Henry's pride a long time ago. She signed where Margaret had indicated. Each signature felt like a small liberation. A tiny step toward the life she was rebuilding. When she finished, she put down the pen and sat very still. 24 years. Reduced to a stack of paper. Signatures in blue ink. Legal language that described the dissolution of something she had once believed would last forever. It should have been sadder, but mostly it felt like breathing out after holding her breath for a very long time. Henry requested a meeting. Not through his lawyers. Not through intermediaries. A personal email sent to her work address. Eleanor, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But I am asking anyway. Please meet with me one time. Let me say what I need to say. After that I will sign whatever you want. I will not contest anything. I will let you walk away clean. She considered refusing. Considered sending back a single word. No. Closing the door on whatever he thought he needed to express. But something stopped her. Curiosity, perhaps. Or the desire for an ending that felt complete instead of merely procedural. She replied with a time and place. Her office. Tuesday at 4. 1 hour. He agreed. Tuesday arrived. Eleanor dressed carefully. Not for Henry. For herself. A dark suit that made her feel powerful. Heels that added height she did not need but enjoyed. Makeup applied with precision. She looked like exactly what she was. A woman in control of her own life. Delia showed Henry in at 4 o'clock exactly. He looked diminished. That was Eleanor's first thought. Smaller than he had been 2 weeks ago. Grayer. Older. Simone's departure had hit him hard. The baby he would not be raising with her. The future he had been building that had collapsed like a house of cards. He sat across from Eleanor in a chair meant for clients. Not the comfortable seating where equals negotiated. The chair where people came to ask for her help. Thank you for seeing me. You said you had something to say. Eleanor's voice was neutral. Professional. Say it. Henry looked at his hands. They were trembling slightly. I have been thinking. These past 2 weeks. About us. About what happened. About everything. And I realize now that I did not know you. That I stopped knowing you somewhere along the way. Or maybe I never knew you. I thought I did. I thought I understood who you were. But the woman I saw in that conference room. The woman who has handled all of this with more dignity than I deserved. I do not know her. No. You do not. How did that happen? How did I lose you without noticing? Eleanor considered the question. Decided he deserved an honest answer even if he would not understand it. You did not lose me. You set me aside. Year by year. Conversation by conversation. Every time you looked through me instead of at me. Every time you introduced me as your wife who helps people find houses. Every time you forgot to ask about my work or my thoughts or my life. You set me aside and eventually I was not there anymore. Just the space where I used to be. I did not mean to. I know. That is almost the worst part. You did not even notice you were doing it. Henry's face crumpled. For a moment he looked like a child who had broken something precious and only now understood it could not be repaired. Can we try again? His voice was desperate. We could start over. I could learn to see you properly this time. No. Eleanor, please. No. She said it gently. Without anger. The anger had burned through her and what remained was something cleaner. There is nothing to start over with. The foundation was always broken. You just refused to look at the cracks. And Simone. Simone is not why this is ending. Simone is just how I finally saw what was already true. She will not take me back. She said she cannot trust me. She is right not to trust you. You lied to her for 10 months. You were going to let her build a life on a foundation you knew was false. I thought I could make it work. I thought if I gave her enough she would not ask questions. That is not how love works. Then how does it work? Because clearly I do not understand. Eleanor looked at this man she had married. This man she had loved. This man who had taken her devotion and failed to notice it was a gift. Love means seeing someone. Really seeing them. Not the version of them that is convenient for you. Not the parts that serve your needs. All of them. The complicated parts. The inconvenient parts. The parts that take up space you were not planning to give. You never saw me, Henry. You saw a wife. A role. A function. You did not see Eleanor. And now. Now it is too late. The silence stretched between them. Henry's eyes were wet. His hands shook in his lap. He looked like a man who had finally understood the scope of what he had lost. What happens to me now? You sign the divorce papers. You figure out your relationship with Simone and your child. You learn to live with the consequences of choices you made. And you. I rebuild. I remember who I was before I started disappearing. I become whole again. Will you ever forgive me? Eleanor considered the question for a long time. Maybe. Eventually. But forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. It just means I stop carrying the weight of what you did. I loved you. In my way. I know. But your way was not enough. Your way left me invisible. And I am done being invisible. Henry rose. Slowly. Like an old man instead of the powerful executive who had walked through these doors 2 weeks ago. I will sign the papers. He said. I will not contest anything. Thank you. Goodbye, Eleanor. Goodbye, Henry. He walked to the door. Paused. Looked back. For what it is worth. You are magnificent. I wish I had noticed sooner. Then he was gone. Eleanor sat alone in her office as the light faded outside her windows. She had said goodbye to her marriage. Not with screaming or tears or dramatic confrontation. With words exchanged between two people who finally understood each other too late. It was sad. But it was also complete. She could move forward now. Without wondering. Without hoping. without waiting for Henry to become someone he had never been capable of being. The door was closed, and ahead of her the rest of her life was waiting to begin. Spring arrived slowly. February became March. Grey skies gave way to occasional sun. The city began to thaw after months of cold. Eleanor sold the penthouse, moved into a smaller apartment that she chose herself. Every piece of furniture, every painting on the walls, every corner arranged exactly the way she wanted. It was not about downsizing. It was about starting fresh, building a space that reflected who she was instead of who she had been expected to be. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday morning. She received a text from Margaret. Papers filed. Divorce final. Congratulations. Such a strange word for the end of a marriage. Congratulations. As though she had accomplished something worth celebrating. But perhaps she had. She had survived. Had extracted herself from a situation that was slowly erasing her. Had reclaimed her identity and her autonomy and her right to take up space. That was worth celebrating. That was worth everything. Dr. Grace Okwu invited Eleanor to Ashworth House in April. The purchase had closed. The renovations were beginning. The research center was taking shape. Eleanor drove out on a Saturday morning. The countryside was green now. Blooming. Alive in ways it had not been when she last made this drive with her husband's mistress in her rearview mirror. Grace met her at the front door. She was small. 60s. Grey hair cut short. Hands that had spent decades doing detailed work. Eyes that sparkled with intelligence and warmth. Welcome, Grace said. I wanted you to see what we are creating. They walked through the house together. The bones were the same. The architecture Cecilia had lived with. The windows that let in perfect light. The gardens that were being restored to their original design. But something had changed. The house felt alive now. Purposeful. Like it was finally being used for what it was meant to do. Grace showed her the studio. Cecilia's studio. Now filled with workstations for visiting scientists and artists. Original specimens alongside modern equipment. The old and new working together. We found more of her drawings. Grace said. In the archives. Pieces that were never published. We are going to create a complete digital catalogue. Her work will be accessible to anyone in the world who wants to study it. She would have loved that. I think so too. Grace looked at Eleanor with knowing eyes. I heard what happened. The buyer before me. The circumstances. Yes. I want you to know that I understand what this place means. Not just scientifically. The history. The woman who lived here and what she went through. Eleanor nodded, unable to speak for a moment. I am going to honor her. Grace continued. Every day that I work here I am going to remember that a woman made herself small in this house because her husband could not see her properly. And I am going to make sure that never happens again. This will be a place where women are seen. Where their work matters. Where no one has to disappear. Eleanor felt tears on her cheeks. Thank you. No. Thank you. You could have sold this house to anyone. You could have taken the higher offer. Instead you fought for something better. It was the least I could do. After everything. It was not the least. It was extraordinary. And Cecilia would be proud. They stood together in the studio. Light pouring through the windows. History and future meeting in a space that had witnessed both tragedy and transformation. I have something for you, Grace said. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small object. We found it during the initial cleaning. Tucked into a drawer in Cecilia's desk. It was a brooch. Small. Delicate. A botanical illustration in miniature rendered in enamel and gold. A flower Eleanor did not recognize. What is it? A ghost orchid. One of the rarest species Cecilia ever documented. She must have had this made special. We think it was meant to be a gift. There was a note with it. Grace handed Eleanor a slip of paper. Aged and fragile. Eleanor read the words written in faded ink. For my successor. Whoever finds this, I hope you know your own worth. I hope you never wait for someone else to see you. The world is full of blind men. Do not waste your brilliance hoping they will open their eyes. She closed her hand around the brooch. I cannot take this. You must. Cecilia wanted someone to find it. Someone who needed to hear those words. That is you. Eleanor looked at the brooch. At the delicate flower preserved in gold. At the message from a woman who had died more than a century ago but somehow knew exactly what Eleanor needed to hear. The world is full of blind men. Do not waste your brilliance hoping they will open their eyes. She had wasted 24 years. But she had the rest of her life to stop. The first anniversary of Eleanor's divorce passed quietly. She did not mark it with celebration or mourning. Just acknowledged it. A year since the papers were signed. A year since she officially stopped being Henry Prescott's wife. A year since she started being just Eleanor again. The changes in her life were profound but subtle. She worked differently now. Still with excellence. Still with the precision that had made her reputation. But without the need to downplay or diminish. Without the automatic reflex to make herself smaller. She attended industry events and introduced herself with confidence. Not someone's wife. Not a woman who helps people find houses. Eleanor Mercer. One of the most respected property consultants in the world. People listened when she spoke. Not because she demanded attention but because she no longer deflected it. She dated occasionally. Nothing serious. She was not ready for serious. But she enjoyed the process of being seen. Being appreciated. Being asked questions about her life and having someone actually listen to the answers. She thought about Cecilia often. Wore the brooch sometimes. Tucked beneath her collar where no one could see it. A private talisman. A reminder. Do not waste your brilliance hoping they will open their eyes. She did not waste it anymore. Simone called once. 6 months after everything fell apart. The baby had been born. A boy. Henry's son. He wants to be involved. Simone said. He has been trying. Visiting every week. Taking parenting classes. How is that going? Better than I expected. He seems different. Quieter. Like he is actually thinking about things for the first time. Maybe he learned something. Maybe. Or maybe this is just a phase. I do not trust him yet. But I am letting him try. That seems fair. How are you, Eleanor? The question was genuine. Not polite small talk. Real curiosity. I am good. Better than good. I am myself again. That is all I ever wanted. I am glad. For what it is worth. I am glad something good came out of all that pain. The call ended. Eleanor thought about Henry. The man he was trying to become. Whether people could really change or just learn to perform differently. She did not know. Did not need to know. His transformation was not her concern. Her own transformation was enough. There was a property Eleanor had been watching for years. Not for a client. For herself. A small estate outside the city. Victorian. Overgrown. Neglected for decades. The kind of place that most buyers would see as a teardown. Eleanor saw potential. She saw gardens that could be restored. Rooms that could be filled with light. A space that could become hers in a way the penthouse never had. She made an offer. Negotiated. Closed. And on a spring morning exactly 2 years after Henry had walked into her office with Simone at his side, she moved into her own home. Delia helped her unpack. Boxes of books. Artwork she had collected over 30 years. The brooch in its velvet case placed carefully on her dresser. It is beautiful, Delia said, looking around the library with its built-in shelves and bay windows. It suits you. I know. That is why I bought it. For the first time in my life I am living somewhere that reflects who I actually am. That must feel good. It feels like everything. They stood together in the afternoon light. 2 women who had been through something together. Who had arrived at the other side. What now? Delia asked. Now I plant a garden. Eleanor smiled. I learn how to grow things. I fill this house with life. And work. Work continues. It always has. But it is not all of who I am anymore. I am allowed to be other things too. Like what? Like a woman who putters in her garden, who reads novels in the evening, who invites friends over for dinner and does not worry about impressing anyone, who takes up space without apology. That sounds wonderful. It does it not? Eleanor looked out the window at the overgrown gardens waiting to be transformed. She thought about Cecilia, about the botanical illustrations that had outlasted a husband who never understood them, about the letter written to a sister explaining why leaving was not failure but survival. She thought about all the years she had spent becoming invisible, and all the years ahead when she would be undeniably present. The world is full of blind men. She was done waiting for them to see. She was going to live her life in brilliant color whether anyone was watching or not. And that was enough. That was everything. The story ended not with a grand gesture but with a quiet morning. Eleanor woke early, made coffee, walked through her house as dawn light filled the rooms. The garden was taking shape. Roses she had planted, herbs growing in raised beds. A small section dedicated to the ghost orchid she had learned about from Cecilia's work. She stood at her window and looked at what she had built. Not just the garden. Not just the house. A life. Hers. Complete without anyone else's validation. Beautiful without anyone else's attention. Real without anyone else's permission. She had spent 24 years disappearing. Now she was here. Fully present. Taking up exactly as much space as she needed. And somewhere across time Cecilia Ashworth was smiling. Because another woman had found her worth. Had stopped waiting. Had built something that mattered. The legacy continued. Not in the grand histories. Not in the headlines. In the quiet mornings and planted gardens and lives rebuilt from the rubble of what should have been. In the women who refused to vanish. In the ones who remembered they were allowed to be seen. Eleanor lifted her coffee cup. To Cecilia. She said softly. To all the women who walked away from men who could not see them. She drank. And the morning continued. And her life stretched out ahead of her. Full of possibility. Full of light. Exactly as it should have been all along.